fell in love with my stepmother, the one woman I was never supposed to look at twice. But before you judge me, before you call me names, or assume you understand the kind of man I am, listen to what I have to say. My story didn't start with desire. It didn't start with lust. It started long before Adayora ever stepped into my life.
Before we begin, quickly like and subscribe.
My name is Emeka, and the roots of what eventually happened were planted in my childhood, in a life shaped by loss, silence, and the kind of loneliness that grows quietly inside a person until it becomes part of their bones. I was only 2 years old when my mother, Eneka, passed away. They told me she was a bright woman, whose laughter could fill a compound, whose kindness could soften even the hardest hearts. They told me she prayed for me every morning, carried me everywhere, and kissed my forehead when she thought no one was watching. But these were just stories. Stories other people carried, not memories I owned. I never knew her. Not really. One night she fell sick, a fever that came like a thief, burning through her body, stealing her breath. She died before morning came. And from that moment, my life changed in ways my young mind could never understand. My father tried to be everything for me. He was a hard-working man, a building contractor who carried cement bags on his shoulder as if they weighed nothing. To the outside world, he was strong, structured, and unshakable. But inside, he was a man broken too early by the kind of love that never heals after it is lost. He raised me alone for many years, but he raised me with the emotional stiffness of someone afraid to feel too much again. Our home was always quiet, painfully quiet. Not because we disliked each other, but because grief had stolen the sound of warmth from our lives. My father loved me. I never doubted that, but he loved me like a man who feared that if he held me too closely, life would find a way to snatch me from him too. He woke early, returned late, and lived with his heart locked behind the door. Even I couldn't open. Growing up, the only image I had of my mother was the framed photograph in our small sitting room. Her wearing her wedding attire, smiling as though she had seen the future and loved what she saw. I used to stand on the sofa just to touch her face through the glass. I imagined her speaking to me, telling me stories, or scolding me lovingly after a long day of play. Stories from relatives filled the gaps. My grandmother said I inherited her smile. An uncle insisted I had her stubbornness. Old women in the village said her spirit never left me. But story can never replace a mother. The absence of her voice, her presence, her touch, it left a hole so deep I didn't even understand it until much later. My father, meanwhile, remained a man of stone and silence. He worked tirelessly, perhaps too tirelessly, and poured every ounce of energy into providing for me. But while he gave me food, shelter, and education, he couldn't give me what I craved most: emotional softness. I missed what I had never known. I still remember the first time I caught him staring into the empty room that used to be my mother's. I was about 8 years old. He didn't enter. He stood at the doorway like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. His shoulders dropped in a way I had never seen before. I wanted to ask, "Daddy, are you okay?" I didn't. Our home was a house of unspoken emotions. Questions were dangerous. Tears were private. Pain was swallowed whole. When I was 9, I woke one night to drink water and saw him sitting alone in the dim light of the television. He held my mother's picture close to his chest, his thumb slowly brushing her face. "Why did you leave me?" he whispered. I wasn't supposed to hear that. It was the first time I realized my father didn't just miss my mother. He was still grieving her. His grief made him a protector, but also a distant one. And because of that distance, I grew up both strong and fragile at the same time. Independent, but inwardly starved of affection. By the time I turned 16, I had mastered silence. I had mastered loneliness. I had mastered the art of pretending everything was fine, even when I felt empty inside. Then, in SS3, my father suffered an accident at a construction site. Not life-threatening, but enough to keep him resting at home for weeks. I cooked for him, cleaned the house, and helped him move around. And maybe it was the vulnerability of being bedridden. Or maybe he had carried a weight for too long, but something in him softened. One evening, as I adjusted his pillow, he said my name quietly. Emeka. I turned. He looked at me with eyes that seemed older than his age. I failed you in some ways. My chest tightened. I didn't know how to respond. You needed a mother. You needed softness. He swallowed hard, but I didn't know how to give you that. I had never seen him so open, so human. It felt like the walls he had built for years were finally cracking. You deserved more than I could give, he murmured. I wanted to tell him he had tried. I wanted to tell him I loved him, but the words got stuck in my throat. Maybe because we weren't used to speaking that openly. Maybe because love felt too heavy to put into words. We sat in silence afterward, two men shaped by the same loss. Neither of us knew it then, but that silent hunger for emotional connection would become the doorway for everything that happened later. Because loneliness doesn't just stay empty, it searches for warmth, for comfort, for home. And years later, that search would lead me to Adora, my stepmother, the woman who would change everything. If someone had told me that the quiet rhythm of my life, the predictable, emotionless pattern my father and I had followed for years, would be shattered by a single woman stepping into our home, I would have laughed. But that was before Adeora. I was 20 years old when she entered our lives. A man, not a boy. Old enough to know right from wrong, yet still young enough to be vulnerable to the kind of warmth I had never experienced before. My father was 45 then, still strong, still respected, still hardworking, but age had begun to settle into his bones. The accident from 2 years before had slowed him down in ways he pretended not to notice. His back hurt more frequently. His steps were heavier. He sat down with a sigh he didn't even realize he made. Loneliness had become his shadow. I noticed these things, but I didn't say anything. We didn't talk about emotions in our home. We talked about bills, food, fuel prices, school fees, practical things, never loneliness, never fear, never love. So, when my father gathered the courage to tell me he had met someone, I was surprised. It happened on an ordinary evening. I was in the sitting room, scrolling through my phone, when he cleared his throat, the way he did whenever he was uncomfortable. Emeka, he said, standing beside the door. I want to discuss something with you. I looked up. He almost never needed discussion. What is it, Daddy? He hesitated. I could see him picking his words carefully, as if each one carried weight. There is someone I've been talking to. I blinked. Someone? As in a woman. For a moment, I didn't know how to feel. My father had never brought any woman home since my mother died. Not even rumors. Not one phone call. Nothing. I sat up straighter. You're in a relationship? I asked. He exhaled slowly. I don't know if I'd call it that yet, but I want you to meet her. Her name was Adora. She was 30 years old, soft-spoken, intelligent, and far more graceful than most women her age. When he told me her age, I saw the worry in his eyes. It expected judgment. She was only 10 years older than me and 15 years younger than him. Nigerian society would whisper. People would talk, but I didn't judge him. If anything, I was relieved he finally allowed himself to feel something again. When do I meet her? I asked simply. My father relaxed for the first time that evening. Sunday. Sunday came too quickly. I still remember the first moment I saw her. Adewora stepped into our compound wearing a simple green dress that hugged her figure modestly. Her skin was the kind of brown that looked kissed by the sun. Her hair was in soft curls that brushed her shoulders. She smiled gently when she saw me, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Good afternoon," she greeted, her voice carrying the softness of someone who thought before she spoke. I greeted her back, trying to act normal, but something in me shifted. Not desire, not yet. It was something else, something softer, curiosity, maybe, or recognition of a kind soul. My father introduced us, his voice firmer than I'd heard in years. "This is my son, Emeka." She turned to me with a slight nod. "I've heard so much about you," she said. I almost laughed. My father wasn't much of a storyteller. We all sat in the sitting room, and she brought gifts, fruits, bread, and wine. She didn't behave like a young woman chasing marriage or trying to impress. She behaved like someone genuinely grateful for peace. When she spoke, she listened just as deeply. She answered questions thoughtfully. She didn't force conversation. She didn't act timid, but she wasn't loud either. She was balanced, calm, present. I saw it. My father looked brighter around her. It was the first thing I noticed. He sat straighter. He laughed. Actually laughed. Something I hadn't seen in years. His eyes softened when he watched her. There was admiration, respect, quiet affection. A man who had been in emotional winter for more than a decade was suddenly finding spring. I should have been happy for him, and I was. Truly, a form, a pull, a sense of comfort I didn't understand. Maybe it was because Adora was everything our home had always lacked. Gentle, attentive, emotionally aware. Maybe loneliness recognized. Loneliness. Maybe some part of me, the part that had grown up without a mother's touch, gravitated toward the first person who made our house feel warm. But at that moment, I felt nothing inappropriate. Just admiration. It was later, much later, that admiration became something else. My father married Adora after 6 months. A quiet civil ceremony, small reception, simple celebration. She moved into our home 2 weeks after the wedding. That day, as she unpacked her bags, I saw a look in my father's eyes that made me step back. He wasn't just happy, he was relieved, as if he had been drowning for years and finally found air. Adora, with her soft voice and gentle presence, brought color into our house. She sang while cooking, arranged flowers in places my father never noticed, and organized shelves with the care of someone who respected space. She didn't try to become my mother overnight. She didn't impose. She didn't overstep. Instead, she treated me like an adult, a human being, something my father struggled with. She asked about school. She checked on me when I studied late. She reminded me to eat. She noticed things no one had noticed in years, and it was harmless at first. Beautiful, even. But the heart is a strange thing, especially a heart that has been starved for years. Little by little, without her knowing, and without me realizing, my boundaries began to shift. Slowly, dangerously, Adora entered our lives as my father's wife. But fate had planted a different story in the shadows, a story neither of us saw coming. There are some stories that don't announce themselves when they begin. They don't start with lightning or fireworks. They start quietly, with little moments that seem harmless at first. That was how it began with Adora. Not with desire, not with forbidden thoughts, but with details, small details that slipped into my life. The way sunlight slips through a crack. The first thing I noticed was how she saw me, not as a boy, not as a child, but as a person. My father loved me, yes, but he treated me like someone who needed direction, discipline, correction, not conversation. Adara was different. One evening, I was at the dining table working on an assignment. She walked past, paused, and said, "You've been sitting there for hours. Your back must be hurting. Stretch a little." I didn't even realize I'd been hunched. Nobody ever noticed things like that. Another time, I came home exhausted from school. My father didn't ask what happened. That wasn't his way. But Adoror looked at my face once and said, "Emeka, something happened today. Do you want to talk about it? Or should I just make you something warm to eat?" I didn't talk. I didn't know how to talk. But the offer alone felt new. She made pepper soup that evening, light, warm, and soothing. The kind of food that comforts a tired soul. The kind of food mothers make. It was the first time in my life someone cooked for me because I had a bad day, not because it was mealtime. Something softened inside me, and softness is dangerous when you've lived your whole life in emotional hardness. Adorora never acted like she wanted to replace my mother. She never forced closeness, but she carried the kind of warmth a house recognizes immediately. Her laughter was gentle, her voice calm, her presence steady. She filled spaces without overwhelming them. At first, I didn't feel anything except appreciation, maybe even admiration. But admiration turns into attachment faster than anyone realizes, especially for someone who has spent 20 years hearing silence echo through the walls of his home. My father didn't notice changes. He was too busy being happy in his own quiet way. Idara made him livelier. He smiled more. He talked more at dinner. He rested his hand on her shoulder when serving food. For the first time in years, our house felt like a home. But the heart is greedy when it tastes warmth for the first time. I started looking forward to seeing her when I returned from school. I started listening for her footsteps in the kitchen. I started noticing when she laughed and when she didn't. It was harmless, or so I believed. One particular evening changed everything. Even though at the time I didn't understand the shift. I was in the sitting room reading, and she walked in carrying a bowl of sliced mangoes. She placed it near me without a word. I looked up. "You like mangoes, don't you?" she asked. I nodded. "How did you know?" "You light up a little whenever there's mango in the house," she answered with a small smile. People show their happiness in small ways. That sentence hit something deep inside me, something nobody had ever said to me before. Nobody had ever studied me deeply enough to understand such a small detail. I didn't say anything, but my chest felt warm, unfamiliar. She began to walk away, then paused at the doorway. "Your father might not say it often," she added softly, "but he's proud of you." I swallowed hard, not with forbidden thoughts, but with details, small details that slipped into my life. The way sunlight slips through a crack. The first thing I noticed was how she saw me, not as a boy, not as a child, but as a person. My father loved me, yes, but he treated me like someone who needed direction, discipline, correction, not conversation. Adara was different. One evening, I was at the dining table working on an assignment. She walked past, paused, and said, "You've been sitting there for hours. Your back must be hurting. Stretch a little." I didn't even realize I'd been hunched. Nobody ever noticed things like that. Another time, I came home exhausted from school. My father didn't ask what happened. That wasn't his way. But Adoror looked at my face once and said, "Emeka, something happened today. Do you want to talk about it? Or should I just make you something warm to eat?" I didn't talk. I didn't know how to talk. But the offer alone felt new. She made pepper soup that evening, light, warm, and soothing. The kind of food that comforts a tired soul. She didn't know what that meant to me. Or maybe she did. The first moment I felt this shift, the first moment I realized my feelings were growing beyond admiration, happened during a rainy afternoon. The rain was heavy, the kind that makes the whole neighborhood quiet. Her father was out. I was in my room reading, and she knocked. Abeka, do you have an umbrella? The roof in the kitchen is dripping. I need help with the bucket. I followed her. The rainwater was leaking from one corner, so we shifted buckets, wiped the floor, and inspected the damage. She laughed when some drops splashed on her arm. You see this house, she said lightly. It's old and stubborn, just like your father. I laughed, genuinely. It felt good. She looked at me in surprise, her eyes soft. You don't laugh much, she said. I didn't know how to reply. Her gaze lingered. Just a second too long, a second that changed something. The air thickened, silent but charged with something unspoken. She looked away quickly, clearing her throat. Thank you for helping. She stepped back, brushing my arm lightly in the cramped space. A touch so small it should have meant nothing, but my heart reacted before my mind did. It skipped. Just once, just enough for me to notice. I shook it off, but later that night, I replayed the moment over and over. Her laugh, her eyes, the way she said I didn't laugh much, the way she noticed me. Something was happening to me, something I didn't want to name. Something I wasn't supposed to feel. Over the next weeks, the connection grew. Unintentionally, unknowingly. When she cooked, she made sure to include something I liked. When I studied, she brought me tea without asking. When my father traveled for work, she checked if I had eaten. When she fell sick briefly, I found myself pacing, worried, restless. Too worried, restless. One night, she slept on the sofa because she had a slight fever and didn't want to disturb my father. I woke up around 2 a.m. and found her curled up in a blanket, shivering slightly. Something tightened inside me, a protective instinct so strong I could barely breathe. I covered her with another blanket. She opened her eyes slightly. Emeka, her voice was weak. Yes, you're kind, she whispered. Then she slept again. My heart didn't. I stayed awake the rest of the night. There is a thin line between care and attachment, and once you cross it, feelings grow roots. You can no longer pull out. I didn't know it then, but I had already crossed that line. Ada Raw wasn't just my father's wife anymore. She had become someone whose presence filled an emptiness I had carried since childhood. An emptiness is a dangerous thing, because it always searches for what fills it. It wasn't love yet, not fully, not visibly, but the seed was planted, and it was only a matter of time before it grew into something neither of us could run from. The days that followed felt strangely different, not because something dramatic had happened, but because something unseen was quietly shifting between us. Like the slow movement of clouds before a storm. You don't notice them at first. Then suddenly the sky is dark. Adayara didn't avoid me the next morning. In fact, she startled me. She knocked gently on my door around 9 a.m. Emeka, are you awake? Her voice carried a softness I hadn't heard before, almost careful. I opened the door, still unsure how to act around her. She smiled lightly. I made breakfast. Your dad already left for work. Eat before it gets cold. Her eyes hold a kind of warm calm that made my chest feel tight. I followed her to the dining table. She'd made yam and egg sauce, simple, but the effort hit me deeply. You didn't have to do all this, I said. I know, she replied, but I wanted to. Those 4 words, they branded themselves into my mind. We sat in silence for a while, but not the uncomfortable kind. My heart was beating too fast, my spoon shaking slightly. I hoped she didn't notice. When I finally looked up, I caught her staring. Not the accidental type of stare, a studying one, a searching one, the type someone uses when they're trying to understand a puzzle they didn't expect to encounter. Emeka, she began quietly. About yesterday, I didn't mean to make things awkward. You didn't. I lied. She gave a small, guilty smile. We're family. I should be able to talk to you freely. And you should feel comfortable with me. Family. That word landed heavily because I didn't feel like she was just family. Not anymore. And I hated myself for it. She stood up to clear the plates.
I automatically moved to help.
When my hand brushed hers, she froze. Just 1 second. She didn't pull away. Not immediately. Just slowly, deliberately, as if she needed time to gather herself. Thank you, she whispered, her eyes lowering. That was the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the house became a new world. Either and I talked more. I'd stepmother and stepson, but like two people who found an unexpected comfort in each other. She asked about my classes, my writing, my friends, my dreams. Nobody had asked me those things since my mother died. Sometimes she would pass by the living room and, instead of walking away, sit with me. Just talking, nothing inappropriate, but the closeness, the gentle laughter, the way she listened, as if every word mattered. It was dangerous. One evening, I told her something I hadn't told anyone.
I remember my mom's voice, I said quietly.
But her face is fading. Aurora's expression softened. In a way I will never forget. I would have loved to meet her, she said. She must have been an incredible woman to raise a boy with such a good heart. My chest tightened painfully. You talk like you knew her. In a way I feel like I do, she whispered. She reached out her hand, brushing my shoulder in a comforting gesture. But it didn't feel like a motherly touch. It felt like a touch my body wasn't strong enough to handle. I'm here for you, Emeka, she said. You're not alone. Those words, they were the match that lit the fire. One Saturday afternoon, it rained heavily. My dad was out of town for a work conference, leaving the house unusually quiet. Adawar was in the living room, curled up with a blanket, watching a movie. I tried to stay in my room, but the sound of the rain and the emptiness of the house made the walls feel tight around me. I stepped out. She looked up immediately. Come join me. I shouldn't have, but I did. We watched in silence at first. The movie didn't matter. What mattered was how close we were sitting, how the lightning illuminated her face, how her perfume mixed with the smell of rain. Halfway through, a thunderclap shook the windows. Instinctively, she flinched, and a hand reached for my arm. She didn't remove it, neither did I. The air thickened between us. The room suddenly felt too small. Her breathing changed, just a little, but enough for me to notice. Emeka, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. Yeah? This is complicated. I know. We shouldn't. But neither of us moved. Neither of us broke the tension. Neither of us stepped away. Another flash of lightning filled the room, and I saw it clearly, the conflict in her eyes. The part of it that knew the rules, and the part of it didn't care. Slowly, she withdrew her hand, not because she wanted to, because she had to. We should watch something else, she said quickly, reaching for the remote, with shaking fingers. But we both knew something had changed. Something irreversible. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I stepped into the hallway to get water. And there she was, standing on the balcony, silently staring into the rain. I approached quietly. Can't sleep. She didn't turn. Some nights, she said softly, my mind just refuses to rest. Why? This time, she looked at me, really looked at me, because I'm living a life I never planned for. She exhaled shakily, then continued.
I never imagined I would marry a man 15 years older. I thought my life would go differently, But life,
It twists you. It pushes you into corners you never expected. And now, her voice broke a little. I'm trying to be the woman everyone expects me to be. A wife, a stepmother, a mirror of what society calls good. She shook her head. Inside, I'm still searching for myself. My heart ached for her in a way that scared me. You not alone, I murmured. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with truth. I know, she whispered. For the first time, I realized something. I wasn't the only one fighting feelings I wasn't supposed to have. She was fighting them too. Adora knew I was falling for her long before I fully admitted it to myself. She saw it in the way my eyes lingered on her a moment too long, in the way I found excuses to be near her when my father was gone. Perhaps she didn't stop it because of my youth. She was only 10 years older, and maybe she saw in me the vulnerability of a young man, starved for affection, someone who needed guidance rather than rejection. Or perhaps it was because of my father's constant absences, with him away so often. The house felt empty, and our conversations filled a void for her too. She had married for stability, but stability came with loneliness when her husband was perpetually on the road. In those quiet evenings, she might have convinced herself that our closeness was harmless, a way to make the home feel less hollow. The next day, everything changed again. I walked into the kitchen and found my father hugging Abdora from behind. Her laugh, polite, small, forced, echoed through the room. My chest tightened with something ugly, something I didn't want to admit. Jealousy.
my father kissed her cheek. I missed you, she smiled. Welcome back. But her eyes flicked to me for a split second. Just one quick glance. A glance with too many emotions packed into it. Guilt, conflict, and something that made me look away before it swallowed me whole. My father didn't notice anything. But I knew. Adaora knew. Our world was trembling, and it was only a matter of time before it broke. My father's return should have restored balance in the house, should have reset everything, should have pushed Adaora and me back into the roles society assigned to us. But life doesn't work like that. Once a line has been crossed in the heart, pretending it never happened becomes impossible. For the first time, I started to see cracks, small ones hidden behind smiles and routines. Cracks that only appear when something deeper is shifting beneath the surface. The days passed slowly after my father came back. He didn't notice anything. He didn't sense the silence that wasn't supposed to be there, or the way Adaora moved around the house with a certain carefulness like someone walking over glass. I avoided her, not because I wanted to, but because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't. But avoidance doesn't work when two people are living under the same roof. One evening, I went to get water from the kitchen and found her standing by the sink, washing plates. The sound of running water filled the room. She didn't turn, but I knew she had sensed me. She always sensed me. Emeka, she said quietly, we can't keep acting like strangers. I'm not acting. She turned off the tap slowly, then faced me. Her eyes were softer than I wanted them to be. Yes, you are, she said gently. You avoid the living room. You eat fast and leave the dining table. You won't even look at me. What do you want me to do? My voice rose a little. I'm trying to respect boundaries. And by pushing me away, you think that helps? I don't know, I burst out. I'm trying to do the right thing. Her expression shifted, hurt, surprise, understanding, all mixed in one. And what is the right thing, Emeka? She whispered. Silence hung between us, heavy and suffocating. I don't know anymore, I finally said.
You're not a bad person, she said quietly. You're human. So am I. She moved past me, leaving the scent of her perfume hanging in the air. It stayed in my lungs long after she was gone. My father began noticing something, but not the truth. He interpreted the tension in his own way. One night during dinner, he cleared his throat. "You two seem quiet lately." Adora smiled. "We're fine." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. My father nodded, satisfied with her answer. He never questioned her much. He believed peace meant silence. The moment he closed the door, Adora exhaled shakily. Sometimes she muttered, "I wish he would see what he refuses to look at." I froze. "What do you mean?" She shook her head quickly. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." But I couldn't forget. Because her words meant something. Something heavy. Something dangerous.
If this moment hit you, prepare your mind for what comes next. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Leave a comment and let us know where you are watching from.
That same night, I stepped outside for air. The sky was clear. Stars scattered everywhere like broken glass. I sat on the small concrete bench near the garden. I didn't expect her to come, but she did. Emeka. Her voice came softly behind me. I turned. She was wrapped in a shawl, her hair loose, her expression unreadable. "Can I sit?" she asked. She sat, leaving a small distance between us, but not enough to calm my heart. "I didn't mean to confuse you," she said after a long pause. "You didn't confuse me," I said. "I confused myself." She gave a sad smile. "Still, I need to explain something." I looked at her carefully. "I married your father because I wanted stability," she confessed. "Not because I was in love with him." My breath caught. I was tired. She continued. "Tired of hoping, tired of failed relationships, tired of waiting for a man who would choose me for me. When your father came, he offered peace, a home, and love?" I asked quietly. She hesitated. "I was hoping it would grow." My chest tightened painfully. "And did it grow?" I asked. She didn't speak. Silence answered for her. Then she turned to me, her eyes shining with something raw, something she had held back for too long. "But you," her voice broke, "you make things complicated." I swallowed hard. "I didn't ask for this. I know." Her voice trembled. "And I didn't plan it." We looked at each other, longer than we should have, longer than was safe. Then she stood abruptly. "We can't talk about this again," she whispered. "It's wrong, very wrong." "And still," I said before I could stop myself, "here we are." She closed her eyes, as if steadying herself. "Yes," she whispered, "here we are." And then she walked away.
But I knew something had changed between us again, something deeper, something neither of us could run from anymore. A week later, everything took another turn. It was her birthday. My father bought a necklace. A nice one, expensive, shiny, elegant. He gave it to her in the living room, smiling proudly as he fastened it around her neck. She thanked him, but I didn't miss the forced smile. Later that evening, she knocked on my door. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside. She held a small plate, cake, a slice saved for me. "I wanted to thank you for your help around the house lately," she said. "I notice everything." She set the plate on my table, but as she turned to leave, I called out, "Adaora." She stopped. I took a breath. "I didn't get you a gift." She smiled sadly. "You don't need to." "But I want to." Her eyes softened. "Keep being kind. It means more than anything you can buy." I stepped closer without realizing. "Happy birthday," I said quietly. "Thank you," she whispered. Again, we were too close. Again, neither of us moved. Again, tension filled the air until it felt too thick to breathe. But this time, she stepped back first. "Good night, Emika," she whispered, almost painfully. And then she left, closing the door gently behind her, as if afraid her heart would fall out if she shut it too hard. A few days later, something happened that none of us could ignore. My father announced during dinner, "I'll be traveling for 3 weeks. There's a training in Abuja I can't miss." As my father's business trips became more frequent, the dynamics in our home shifted in ways that were both subtle and profound. He was often away for days or even weeks, chasing contracts in distant cities, leaving Adaora and me to navigate the quiet spaces of the house alone. It was during these absences that our relationship deepened, blossoming into something intimate and romantic, though we never crossed into physical territory. We talked for hours, shared secrets, and found solace in each other's company, but always with an undercurrent of fear that held us back from more. When we were alone, our interactions were charged with a romantic tension that we both acknowledged but never acted on. We'd sit on the balcony under the stars, talking about our dreams. Adaora sharing stories of her youth in the village, her aspirations to become a teacher before life pulled her in another direction. And me opening up about my fears of never measuring up to my father's expectations. Our laughter would echo through the empty house, and sometimes, in moments of vulnerability, she'd rest her head on my shoulder during a hug that lingered just a bit too long. Those hugs were our closest physical contact, warm, comforting embraces that started innocently but left us both breathless, our hearts racing with the unspoken desire for more. We always wanted to go beyond just talking and hugging. There were nights when the air between us felt electric, when our eyes would lock and the world seemed to narrow to just the two of us. I'd feel the pull to lean in, to close the distance, and I could see the same longing in her eyes, a flicker of temptation that mirrored my own. But we were always scared of the betrayal it would represent, scared of destroying the fragile family we were part of. We're scared of the societal judgment that would follow. Yet, deep down, we both wanted more. It was a constant battle between our hearts and our consciences, a yearning that made every moment together bittersweet.
These absences from my father only amplified our bond. Without him there to anchor us in our roles, the lines blurred. We'd cook together, her teaching me recipes from my childhood, our hands brushing as we chopped vegetables, sending sparks through me. Or we'd watch old movies late into the night, her laughter filling the room in a way that made the house feel alive. In those times, our romance was unspoken but palpable. Stolen glances, shared silences, and the kind of emotional intimacy that felt like a secret world just for us. Adaora would sometimes pause mid-conversation, her expression softening as she realized how close we'd grown. But she'd smile and continue, perhaps telling herself it was just companionship in a lonely home. A fragile peace we had maintained, shattered in a single moment. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a loud accusation. It was subtle, almost accidental, but the consequences were immediate and irrevocable. It was a Sunday afternoon. The house was quiet, my father away on a short business trip. Adaora and I were in the living room, exchanging polite conversation that carried the unspoken weight of weeks of tension. I reached for a book on the shelf for her. She stepped closer to see the title. Our hands brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, almost trivial. But then, in that charged silence, our eyes met, and the pull became unbearable. I leaned in slowly, my heart pounding, and she didn't pull away. Our faces were inches apart, lips nearly touching, in what would have been our first kiss, a moment born of all the suppressed longing we'd carried. But in that moment, my father returned unexpectedly, earlier than we anticipated. The door slammed open behind us. Both of us froze. His eyes widened, then narrowed. The world slowed. Emeka, Adara, he said carefully, almost too carefully. His voice carried the weight of suspicion that had been silently building for months. We both stammered, trying to explain, but the words were empty. The look in his eyes was enough. I've been suspicious for some time, he said, his hands gripping the edge of the sofa. I didn't want to believe it, but I can see it now. You are too close, too familiar. Something is happening in this house that should not happen. I tried to speak, to deny, but my voice failed me. Aderora's hands trembled as she gripped her shawl. My father's face twisted with a rage I had never seen before, his eyes blazing like coals, his fists clenched so tightly, his knuckles turned white.
What is this abomination under my roof?
He roared, his voice thundering through the room, making the walls seem to shake. He stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth, his breath coming in heavy gasps as if the betrayal had knocked the air from his lungs. We tried to explain ourselves, our words tumbling out in a desperate rush. Daddy, it's not what you think, I stammered, my heart pounding. Adora nodded frantically beside me, her voice breaking. We were just talking, nothing more. Please, listen. But his anger only grew, his face reddening as he waved us off. Enough. I don't want to hear your lies, he shouted, turning on his heel and storming off to his room, slamming the door so hard that a picture frame rattled on the wall. Adora and I exchanged a glance, our faces pale with fear and shame. We couldn't leave it like that. After a few minutes, we followed him, knocking softly on his door before entering. We dropped to our knees before him, our heads bowed. Daddy, please forgive us, I pleaded, tears stinging my eyes. Nothing physical has happened between us, I swear. It was just emotions. We got carried away. Adara echoed me, her voice trembling. It's true, we've never crossed that line. It was the work of the devil, tempting us in our weakness. We're so sorry. But my father, sitting on the edge of his bed with his head in his hands, only shook his head, his anger simmering into a cold fury. Leave my room immediately, he said through gritted teeth, not even looking at us. I can't bear to see your faces right now. We backed out, closing the door quietly, our hearts heavy. Alone in his room, my father paced, muttering to himself in the dim light. How could I have been so blind? He whispered, blaming himself over and over. I've been too busy, always working, never paying attention to what's happening under my own roof. Maybe my wife was starved of attention, feeling neglected because I'm always away. And in Mecca, what has he been feeling since his mum died? The loneliness must have eaten at him, and I did nothing to fill that void. This is my fault as much as theirs. The next morning, he called us into the living room. His face stern but composed, the anger from the night before replaced by a grave seriousness. Sit down, he said, his voice steady. I need the truth from both of you. If you have gone physical, if anything like that has happened between you, it is an abomination in our society. A ritual must be done to cleanse this house and our family name. We both shook our heads vigorously, swearing on everything sacred. Nothing has happened, Daddy, I said earnestly. I bear.
Adara nodded frantically beside me,
Tears streaming down her face. It's true. Please, forgive us. We're begging you. He studied us for a long moment, then sighed deeply. Turning to me, he said, Emeka, if you are truly sorry, then you must leave for the school hostel today. I want you to go and experience a new environment, make new friends, and see if what you feel for Adora is truly love or just the confusion of loneliness. Desperately, Daddy, please, don't send me away. Don't disown me. I can't bear it. But he raised a hand, his eyes softening slightly. I'm not disowning you or sending you away forever, my son. I've been selfish, always keeping you close, because I was scared the world would take you from me, like it took your mother. But that's no way to live. You need this. I felt bad, a deep ache in my chest, but I nodded, agreeing to move to the university hostel. Then he turned to Atora, his voice gentle but firm. And you, Adora, if you feel suffocated here, if you don't love me, then leave. Make the decision for your own happiness. I won't hold you back. She looked at him, her eyes filled with regret and resolve. I want to stay, she said quietly. I choose to stay and make this right. That afternoon, I packed my bags and moved to the university hostel. It wasn't easy at first. The noise, the strangers, the unfamiliar routines left me feeling lost and adrift. But slowly, I managed to make new friends, joining clubs in school like the debate society and a football group. I threw myself into my studies, and gradually, the pain began to fade as I focused on my new environment. Even during breaks, I went to stay with my grandmother in the village, the place my dad had always been afraid to let me go. Even when relatives offered to help after Mom died, he had feared losing me there. But now it became a refuge, filled with stories and warmth that helped me heal. After graduation, I came back home happily, my degree in hand, and a sense of peace in my heart. Adora had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl, who were now 2 years old, toddling around with infectious laughter. My father greeted me with open arms. The shadows of the past lifted. The home became peaceful again, filled with the sounds of family, forgiveness weaving us back together, stronger than before. Looking back, I understood something crucial. Love is not always meant to be acted upon. Desire does not always dictate destiny. Sometimes the heart must endure in silence, and that endurance itself is a form of devotion. Adora and I discovered the weight of responsibility, the cost of emotional honesty, and the unspoken strength of restraint. We had crossed dangerous ground emotionally, yes, but we chose to protect the people we loved most. Years later, I would remember that time not as a shameful chapter, but as a period of awakening. I learned the complexity of human emotions. I discovered the depth of care, desire, and loyalty. I understood that love can exist in silence, even when it cannot be spoken or acted upon. Life is unpredictable, full of desires and emotions that test the boundaries of right and wrong. Sometimes, the heart leads us to places we never imagined, places of longing, temptation, and forbidden love. But what truly matters is how we respond. Do we act impulsively, letting desire dictate our choices? Or do we pause, reflect, and choose the path that protects the ones we love and preserves the relationships that matter most? Ameka and Adora's story reminds us that love is not always about possession or fulfillment. It is also about restraint, responsibility, and the courage to do what is right, even when the heart wants otherwise. Now, I ask you, when faced with emotions that challenge your morality or relationships, will you confront them with honesty? Will you choose restraint and reflection, even when it's painful? Will you protect what matters most, even if it means sacrificing what you desire? If this story moved you, inspired you, or even made you reflect on your own heart, don't forget to like this video, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for more stories that explore the depth of human emotions, love, and life's toughest choices. Your engagement helps bring more stories like this to life. Stories that make you feel, think, and maybe even see the world differently.